Again, my name is Mary Beth Uberti, and I am the Program Director here at Operation Parent, and we welcome you to our webinar, Teens, E-Cigarettes, and Vaping. Our guest presenter today is Dr. Patricia Purcell, and she is the past president of the Kentucky chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. We were fortunate enough to have her do a presentation for us last year on this topic, and we invited her to come back, and the timing could have been better with everything that's going on in the news. So we're really thrilled to have her here. FYI, our next webinar, the very next one that'll be coming up in November, will be on November 18th. It's Parenting for an Independent and Self-Reliant Child with Dr. Stephen Van Schoik and Karen Lawrence. Karen will be doing the interviewing. Dr. Van Schoik did a presentation for us about a year ago also, and so this is a follow-on to the next steps. So I encourage you, if you're interested in attending this webinar, you can go to our website, go to calendar, and you will see that webinar loaded and ready for registrations. Okay, I think we're pretty much slowed up on people that have come in to attend, which is wonderful, everybody. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Michelle Massey, who's going to go over the GoToWebinar features, and then she will hand it off to Dr. Purcell. FYI, we will be staying on probably past the 3 o'clock hour to get as many questions in as we can. We will stop no matter what at 3:15. At 3:15, if there are any questions that have not been addressed, we will send them to Dr. Purcell, and she is kind enough to say that she will answer you directly. So with that, I will turn it over to Michelle.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mary Beth and I would like to just give a huge thank you to all of our returning Drug-Free Coalition members who keep coming back month after month to view our webinars and the content that we're putting together. We appreciate that, and it adds a lot of value to the work that we're doing here. We'd also love to give a shout out to the states that have large contingencies on this particular webinar: North Carolina, Ohio, and Illinois. Thank you so much for coming in large groups. And we're also excited about a few newcomers that we have today from the Philippines, Canada, and Puerto Rico. So just before we get into the content, I'm just going to go over a few features for the GoToWebinar panel so you know how to use the system today if you're new with us. First, on your webinar control panel, you're going to see an orange arrow. This arrow allows you to open and minimize the control panel. If you wish to view your screen without that control panel, just click on the orange tab and minimize it. We're going to utilize the question feature today. Just so you know, all of our attendees are going to be muted during the presentation. However, we really love hearing from you via the question section. That's about halfway down the control panel. You will send both questions and comments here. There are 3 panels there. The top panel shows you any questions you've already posted. Below that is another light blue panel where you can type your questions and send them directly and privately to us. You can send your questions anytime during this live webinar. We're expecting a lot of questions. The last webinar that Dr. Pat Purcell did with us, we received a lot of questions. So just so you know, if for some reason we don't get to all the questions live, we will follow up with answers to those questions. So what I'm saying is we might go over the 60-minute mark with the question and answer section. We know based on your schedule, you may not be able to stay for the entire time. But you will receive the recording with those questions on it later. We've got some awesome handouts lined up for you today. You're going to get a handout with today's PowerPoint presentation. You've got another handout that has an electronic cigarette infograph on it. Also an e-cig parent tip sheet that will help you with the conversation with your teen. There's a Tobacco 21 fact sheet. So there's a lot going on with legislation right now, and that helps get you in on the key issues. And then at Operation Parent, we also designed a handout that's got some helpful websites that you can do some further research with. Just double click on the handouts to begin the download process. The handouts will only be available to you while we're in session. Once the webinar has ended, You will not be able to download the handouts from this location. However, about an hour prior to this webinar, you should have received an email containing the handouts. So if you don't download the handouts now, please check your email. We had several registrations come in right before we started the webinar, and we've tried to continue sending you the handouts via your email. So just check there and let us know if you didn't get them. There's going to be a short survey sent to you directly after the webinar. It'll take you just about 2 minutes to complete, but the feedback is so valuable as we continue our work here. We're recording the presentation, and the recording link will be included in our follow-up email, which will be sent to you tomorrow afternoon around 3. Also in the follow-up email, for those who are attending this live webinar, you will have an attached certificate of attendance. Now it is my distinct pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Pat Purcell. She's a brilliant woman who is just passionate about public health and teen health, and I'm really excited for you to learn more with us about e-cigarettes.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Purcell, and I wanted to give you a little background on how I became involved with this. As the president of the Kentucky chapter of the AAP, 2 years ago, we were awarded a grant from the National AAP headquarters to look at prevention with adolescents, what we could do to better their health. And we chose to focus on e-cigarettes. One can appreciate at the same time we were focusing on e-cigarettes, there was a huge, rapid epidemic that has occurred with the utilization of e-cigarettes. So it has been, as Michelle said, it has been my passion to try to get as much information out as possible on e-cigarettes, because I do feel the more information that we have available as caregivers of adolescents, as parents, as coaches, whoever comes in contact with adolescents, the more knowledge we have on e-cigarettes, the better able we're going to be to combat it. So I do want to give a thanks to Operation Parent for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you all today. I'd also like to give a word of thanks to the Academy of Pediatrics, and specifically the Julius B. Richmond Center of Excellence. At the end of the presentation, I will have a link that will be available for you all to look at, and it is an excellent source of information. There are handouts available if you want to teach, if you want to create your own teaching webinar, if you want to just have handouts to pass out to parents, to students. It can all be found at the Julius B. Richmond Center. So if you look at the current, this is a Louisville headline. I find that when I read the paper, whether it's a national paper or whether it is a local paper like the Courier Journal, there's going to be an article on e-cigarettes. There's going to be an article on vaping, on the companies that manufacture these products. This article actually looked at Kentucky specifically. It was done by the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky. And what they found in Kentucky, when they looked at 6th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders, the rate of e-cigarette use had actually doubled. And so it goes on. If we look at a national level, this was from the New York Times, and what they looked at and talked about was Marlboro maker Altria has recently bought a stake in the Juul company. They paid $12.8 billion for a 35% stake in Juul. So one can appreciate that a cigarette manufacturer coupling with an e-cigarette manufacturer is rather frightening. If we look at electronic cigarettes, and again, that's going to be any electronic nicotine delivery system, we call them ENDS. It is the most common tobacco product that is used by youth today. If we look, it's 1 in 5 high school students and 1 in 20 middle school students. The current data that was just published probably a week or two ago looked at about 28% of high schoolers admit, and remember that's admit, to utilizing e-cigarettes within the past 30 days. So I think we're going to see the numbers continuing to climb, unfortunately, until we can try to better stop it. So we'll discuss today teen tobacco use. I'd like to help you identify some e-cigarettes and vaping devices because I think that's important to know what they look like and how they work. We're going to look at the prevalence and the health effects that are associated with the risks associated with utilizing electronic nicotine delivery systems. I think it's important to look at teen nicotine addiction and why teens are so vulnerable to this, and then strategies for the prevention. But it's safer than smoking is that unfortunately what has happened through the years, and it's probably within the last 3 to 5 years, as e-cigarette use has taken off, adolescents do not recognize the risks that are associated with it. They tend to think that e-cigarette use is actually safe and definitely safer than utilizing a combustible cigarette. This came about simply because in 2007, 2008, that's when e-cigarettes first came to the market. And they were initially created as a mechanism for someone who was smoking a combustible cigarette, i.e. heating up tobacco and then getting the tar effect also, to be able to transition to a product that still delivered the nicotine but didn't give the tar and the other harmful chemicals. So again, the thought process from the manufacturers have been that this is something that they've used as a marketing tool, that it is safe, i.e. safer, and that is not the case. But unfortunately, that's the message that our adolescents are hearing. So what are the harms that are associated with e-cigarettes? What are the risks? Well, if you look at, as I said, smoked tobacco, e-cigarettes are less harmful because there's not tar that's produced, and there's variable levels of nicotine in these products. But if you look at it in relationship to no tobacco use, no e-cigarette use, or to nicotine replacement, you're looking at the lung function that we're starting to see. It has been in the news in terms of these adolescents as well as adults that have been significantly affected with pulmonary disease, acute events requiring prolonged hospitalizations and prolonged recoveries. The quality control, these products are not FDA approved. No one has studied them, so we don't have an idea of what are in these products and what these adolescents as well as adults are actually inhaling. If you look at the health hazards that occur with what we call bystanders, so someone next to someone who's actually vaping, it is an aerosol. So the difference is that a vapor is something that disintegrates in the air. Aerosol is in droplets in the air. So the aerosol can actually drop on individuals that are surrounding the person that is actually vaping. It can drop on small children, dogs, your couch, anything like that. The safety of these flavor components when they're inhaled, we really don't know what occurs when they are chemically changed and someone inhales them. And it is important to point out that this renormalizes the whole smoking thought process. Combustible cigarette advertising has not been allowed since the 1970s. And so now what we have is this idea of renormalizing smoking, because you can see that vaping is allowed, commercials are allowed. You can see individuals vaping in TV shows. Things that have really gone by the wayside with combustible cigarettes has now reared its head with the utilization of electronic nicotine delivery systems. And then the most important thing that we must not lose sight of is that this puts our adolescents at risk for nicotine addiction, especially at a time when we know they're so vulnerable. So again, users are at risk of nicotine addiction, and again, especially teens. As I pointed out before, it is an aerosol and not a vapor. And I honestly think it should be called aerosolizing, but unfortunately, vaping probably sounded more alluring to the manufacturers, to the marketing team, and that's why they decided to come up with the vaping. But it must be pointed out, this is not a vapor. And when we look, as I said, if you look at what is in the aerosol, well, you have organic compounds, you have ultrafine particles. When you look at, this is a device that's heating up, and so there's going to be little pieces of metal that are actually coming off the heating device as it wears and tears. So we know that there's going to be heavy metals, nickel, tin, lead. And then, of course, as I said, the flavorings, which we know have diacetyl in it, which is, again, not approved for inhalation. So let's look at teen tobacco use. Tobacco use is a pediatric disease. This was stated by David Kessler, and this was the commissioner of the FDA in 1995. And he said it should be considered a pediatric disease. Now, again, this was 1995, and this was the smoking of combustible cigarettes. Well, why do we say it's a pediatric disease? Because most tobacco users actually start before the age of 21. In fact, 95% of adult smokers started before the age of 21. 80% started before the age of 18. So if a person makes it to the age of 21, the risk of them being a smoker of a combustible cigarette is almost next to nothing. Now, unfortunately, e-cigarettes, vaping devices are upending our previous thought process. This was, I think, important to point out. This was a seminal study that was done in 2017. And what they looked at were adolescents, and specifically adolescents, that had either used some sort of vaping product within a period of time, or adolescents who had never used an e-cigarette device, or of course smoked a cigarette. So in the two groups, when they looked at the individuals that had actually, the adolescents that had used an e-cigarette device, they found that 4 times greater risk these adolescents had of going on to smoke a combustible cigarette. So again, 4 times greater risk. So there's substantial evidence now that e-cigarette use increases the risk of ever using a combustible tobacco product, youth as well as young adults. It's not the only risk that's associated with the utilization of e-cigarettes. Remember, this is the device, some of them have lithium batteries, the larger ones, the second and third generation e-cigarette devices. These things can start on fire in your pocket, they can explode. We are seeing different individuals harmed, not by just the inhalation, by having the product on them in and of itself. So if we look at burns, there was a marked increase of burns associated with the utilization of e-cigarette devices, i.e. having them in your pocket or your backpack. If we look at poisonings, that has markedly increased. And part of it is, as we know, the marketers are making these flavors that are very desirable for adolescents, and they're packaging them in containers that look very much like what you would get off the shelf. It looks like a juice box, or it looks like a container of candy. And so we've seen a marked increase in poisonings. Now, we all know that child-resistant packaging laws are associated with decreasing exposure rates. And in 2016, the Child Nicotine Prevention Act actually allowed for any product that contains liquid nicotine now has to be packaged in a child-proof safety package. But I must point out that that is the products that we know have nicotine in them. There are many products on the market that are not labeled as having nicotine, and they unfortunately do have nicotine in them. So the tobacco industry, it's intentionally targeting use. While they deny that they are, there's no way. When you look at these advertisements, they're very adolescent, young adult friendly. They have sports enthusiasts, they have race car drivers, they have parties where people are at. So again, this is generally very significantly targeted toward use. And the usual suspects are our basic combustible cigarette manufacturers. Newport is associated with Blue, although that's been moved off the market. Marlboro is associated with Mark 10, and that's Altria. And then we have Vuse, which is associated with Camel. So these cigarette manufacturers also have e-cigarettes that they are trying to get our adolescents to use. So let's identify some e-cigarette devices and some vaping devices. If we look again, remember, they're called electronic nicotine delivery systems because they're electronically heated up, a battery and an atomizer, and we'll go over that in just a minute. But when we look at the bottom on the left-hand side, next to the ruler, that is the blue is just a USB port, a little flash drive. And then next to it is the Juul. So you can appreciate how small it is, how easily it can fit in your hand. And the Juul device is the one that is most utilized probably for stealth vaping because of its size. It can be plugged in again into a computer to recharge, and it does look like just some sort of a flash drive. So if a parent or a teacher saw it in the computer, we would instantly think it is a flash drive. Next to that one is called a Sorin. It is a newer model, so to speak. And again, you can appreciate no sharp edges. It's not going to be uncomfortable to hold in your hand. And then the one that's red with the black top, that's a Sorin, and that is a teardrop. I will tell you from when I first utilized these slides, which was a couple of years ago for this slide specifically, since then it has undergone changes. It is now very, very thin, and it's actually a little bit smaller. So again, it is made to be able to stealth vape. So if we look at inside an e-cigarette device, first you have a sensor. So someone takes a drag, a hit, basically breathes in off of the device. That sends a signal to the processor. It heats up the atomizer, and then the atomizer heats up the nicotine product that's inside of it. Now, some of the e-cigarette devices, you have to actually put the e-cigarette liquid in. Some, like Juul, come with a pod where it's automatically created, and you just put the pod in. So we have first generation, second generation, and third generation. So the first generation actually looked like cigarettes. So you can appreciate on the top, if you look at the e-cigarette device that's there at the end, it has a little light. And what that was for is to, again, when 2007, 2008, when they came up with these, it was to simulate smoking. So the thought was by having a light at the end as someone inhales, that will be analogous to a cigarette. And so if there's a psychological need for the cigarette, it will meet that need. Then we have our second generation, and these are called tank systems. So these are larger. They hold a lot more of the e-liquid than previously. They usually have a rechargeable battery. It's usually larger than what's in the first generation. And they come in a kit for customization. So that means that someone can kind of make it their own, brand it as their own, which we know for adolescents, they want to have things that are own. It makes it more appealing to them. And then the third generation are called mods. So basically a modification device, and that's the Apollo, the Henley, the Volcano. And these are probably the more advanced systems. They, again, can have a lithium ion battery in it. They have many customizable functions. If you look at first generation in comparison to third generation, so first generation, which you wouldn't really consider a Juul a first generation except in how it is made, it has very little plume, and plume is the name that e-cigarette users give to the smoke that's given off. So they have very little plume, the first generation. The second have more. The third generations are the ones that have a large plume with it, and that's very desirable for some adolescents and for some adults. There are actually commercials that have people utilizing it. There are YouTube videos where people are blowing out their plume and they're making different kinds of circles and halos with it, i.e. the halo. Juul, that's the biggest player on the market now, and it is the most popular e-cigarette device among teens now. It has probably close to 78% of the market. It has its own verbiage. We call it Juuling instead of using an electronic nicotine delivery system named Juul. It has a significantly and the highest nicotine content. One pod contains the same amount of nicotine that's in a pack of cigarettes. It has significant youth-friendly flavorings: mango, fruit medley, creme brulee. There's over 7,000 flavorings that are available for all e-cigarettes that are on the market now. Use has been reported in classrooms and in bathrooms. Again, they're small. It is very easy to stealth vape with them. And while Juul claims to restrict sales online to under 21, it's relatively easy to get online and check a box that says I'm 21, and then subsequently you're able to purchase them. So nicotine addiction, why is this our big risk factor here? Well, nicotine salts, and when we look at a combustible cigarette, it contains the nicotine salts. And what that does is it makes your throat burn. So one could not sit and smoke a pack of cigarettes one after another. Even someone who was considered a chain smoker would find that difficult to do. And that's because it burns the back of your throat. What Juul has been able to accomplish, which makes it so attractive to individuals, they have mixed it with benzoic acid, and the benzoic acid takes that burn away. So it allows for someone to utilize a product without the normal side effects that someone would feel. And again, that makes it more alluring to a teenager because they're not going to have the normal, oh, I don't like the way that this makes me feel, it burns my throat. It's gone with the addition of the benzoic acid. Again, one pod from a Juul equals one pack of cigarettes. And yes, there are many adolescents that are utilizing 2 pods a day and even more. Vape pens. This is important to point out. So some different names for these are called dabs or dabbers or buds or butters. And vape pens are where we think there's a huge association with the individuals that are having the significant lung damage. These pens actually are utilized more for marijuana use, for THC use, because they heat up the THC to a higher level, and subsequently there's a greater delivery of the THC. So you can see and appreciate where one would find it very attractive. You can purchase products that are already pre-mixed for it. Dank Vapes, DANKVAPES, is one of the products that seems to be a running theme for the individuals that have suffered the hospitalizations and the lung damage. But unfortunately, there are 234 different products that were utilized by these individuals. And then unfortunately, people are making their own products and putting them in there. So let's look at the prevalence and the health effects that are associated. Let's look at the health risks that are associated with e-cigarette use. Well, one, we go back to the advertising. 7 in 10 teens were exposed to e-cigarette advertisements in 2016. So think about it. We have a new generation now that is exposed to smoking, and that smoking is considered cool. And I put that in italics. When you look at this picture, as I point out, this is actually a vaping convention, and these are individuals just in a room vaping away. There are vaping conventions that are held here in the United States, and they're actually held all over the world. Again, youth exposure to advertising. When we look, 14.4 million youths are exposed at a retail store because they're sold there. We have 10.5 million that are exposed through the internet. I think that number is probably greater. I think it's sometimes hard to quantify. These are just going to be what someone is seeing as an advertisement. But when you start to add in the shares and the likes, I think the number becomes quite a bit greater. Definitely, we're seeing now, as I said, they're exposed through TV and movies. Remember, cigarettes are not on TV anymore, but now e-cigarette devices are, and then magazines and newspapers. And they're sold everywhere. There are vape shops, there's convenience stores. They're definitely in gas stations. There have the retail outlets, and of course the kiosks sometimes in the mall. Many of the grocery stores actually have them. And as I alluded to before, we have internet vendors. I want to point out, as I alluded to before, when we look at child poisonings, this looks like a juice box, but it's not. It is an apple flavored e-cigarette chemical that people use with their e-cigarettes. This is not ice cream. Again, it looks like it, but it's not. And then this is not whipped cream. So again, I think we must ask ourselves, when the manufacturers of these products say they are not trying to target use, I don't know exactly who they think that they're trying to target with these type of products. So what are the ingredients that are advertised in electronic nicotine delivery systems? Well, there's a humectant, and that's propylene glycol or vegetable glycerin. And that's, again, what makes the plume. And remember, as I said, the plume is the smoke that someone actually breathes out. And then there's the flavorings, and one can purchase products that contain nicotine and say that they don't contain nicotine. Now, these are the ingredients that are actually found in the electronic nicotine delivery solution, the e-juice. So there's the humectant, there's the flavoring, the nicotine, there's toxicants, there's carcinogens. Again, when you heat this up, There's going to be poisonous, there's going to be metal particles that someone's going to actually breathe into their lungs, because again, there's going to be wear and tear on this device. And then of course, the utilization of any kind of psychoactive ingredients, marijuana, anything else that someone would put in there. The label does not always match what is in the product. So 63% of Juul users actually stated they didn't know that the product always contained nicotine. So with Juul, every Juul pod contains nicotine. Juul does not make a product that does not contain nicotine. A study that was just published last year looked at adolescents in the 12 to 21 year range, and they divided them up into adolescents who smoked e-cigarettes with nicotine, adolescents who smoked e-cigarettes who said they never smoked nicotine, and then they looked at marijuana users. And what they found is 40% of the adolescents who used e-cigarette vaping products that did not contain nicotine, stated it did not, they actually had nicotine in their system. They measured the cotinine, which is a byproduct of nicotine in these adolescents' urine, and they found again 40% actually were vaping products that had nicotine in it, although they were not advertised as having that. So propylene glycol has been improved for ingestion, but not for inhalation. So propylene glycol is a preservative. It's utilized in cookies and cake mixes and products that you just buy at the grocery store. And again, it has not been approved for inhalation. So what are the public health harms? Well, kids who use e-cigarettes, as we said, they're really more likely, up to 4 times greater risk of progressing to combustible cigarette use. We have discussed how e-cigarette use uses sweet flavors to attract adolescents and to attract small children. And again, it renormalizes the smoking. And as I said before, TV ads for the first time since 1971, we're starting to see these ads now for these products. Let's understand teen nicotine addiction. Why are they at such risk at this stage of their growth? Well, first we must understand teen brain development. So you have your adult brain and your teen brain. The adult brain, the frontal lobes, that's where most of the activity occurs, and that's where our reasoning, our planning, our thinking occurs. So that's in a mature brain. If we look at an adolescent, most of their activity occurs in the center, in the amygdala area, and so you're going to have that's more of the pleasure, the reward center. So again, think about it. Adolescents really are more into what gives them pleasure, and so they're going to utilize a product like a Juul, like some other electronic nicotine delivery system, because of the pleasure that they obtain from it. And then let's look at the why is the addiction so significant? Well, again, the brain develops, we know now, probably till 21 to maybe 23 years of age. And so that means they have less ability, adolescents, to make decisions, to control their impulses. Someone gives them something, they just take a hit off of it. And then they're sensation seeking. They, again, want to try new things. They're very experimental, as we know, anyone who works with adolescents. And then, unfortunately, they succumb to peer pressure. We know that the adolescent brain is uniquely vulnerable to addiction. So what is nicotine? Well, it's a drug, and people tend to forget that. It's a stimulant. As I said, it's highly addictive. It can cause changes in your brain chemistry, and it's found in all tobacco products. So putting the pieces together, looking at nicotine, which we just said is a drug, we said it is addictive. We said that adolescents are highly vulnerable, and you look at the developing brain. Again, if you look at impulse control, executive functioning, adolescents are delayed with that. We know that a smaller amount of nicotine is needed to create addiction in an adolescent versus an adult. And that goes back to, if someone can make it to age 21 without ever smoking cigarettes, they're probably not going to. And then when we see this early addiction with either cigarettes or now with combustible cigarettes, we're looking at earlier addiction. We're looking at, again, the earlier progression to smoking, and it is harder for these adolescents to be able to quit. So why do teens use e-cigarettes? Well, most of the studies have looked at curiosity, of course, but flavoring definitely is capturing them. Social reasons, if an adolescent maybe is having and experiencing some anxiety or some depression, or again, because of peer pressure, they want to fit in, they're going to capitulate and utilize these products. And then it's important that we point out the perception of health. Again, adolescents, for some reason, because of the marketing that has occurred, tend to think that e-cigarettes are safe to use. And again, we need to dispel that myth. If we look at Kentucky, I think it's important for any state that you're in, and since everyone here is from across the nation, I would encourage you to look at what are the laws in your state. Now, remember, having laws does not always mean that they are enforced. In fact, when you look at this, possession, use of vapor products or alternative nicotine products by persons under age 18 are prohibited. When was the last time we know an adolescent got charged with having a vaping product? So it is difficult to enforce some of these laws, but I think it's important to at least know what they are. We can use it as a tactic when we speak to our adolescents. Know the law in your state. This is actually, and it was updated in December, so if you look at the publichealthlawcenter.org sites, you can actually put in your state and it will tell you what the laws are specifically for your state. So this is a very quick and easy way to get a little bit more information. And did your state make the grade? So the American Lung Association actually, for every state, and again, you can get on their site and you can look to see where your state falls. So this is just for Kentucky. If we look at where we fared, according to the American Lung Association, in terms of smoking cessation, offering ways to prevent smoking, offering resources, well, in tobacco prevention and cessation funding, Kentucky scores an F. Smoke-free air, we're an F. Tobacco taxes were a C, but access to cessation services and then embracing the Tobacco 21, we're all an F. So again, we are not the only state that is in this predicament. I encourage you to look at your own state. Again, use it as a teaching tactic. If we look at the FDA regulation of e-cigarettes, the FDA is actually trying to play catch up, and people, I don't think, realize it. Again, none of the products on the market at this time, there is no FDA authorized or approved electronic nicotine delivery system in the United States. In August 2016, the FDA did issue what they call the deeming rule, where e-cigarette were put under the umbrella of a tobacco product in sisterhood, brotherhood with combustible cigarettes. Unfortunately, though, it has not been mandated, or I should say, the manufacturers have not given the FDA the ingredient list. They've not given any study data that they have. They have until May 2020 to come up with that. And then subsequently, the FDA hopefully will be able to look at it in a more regulatory fashion. But again, this is necessary for improved quality control, to have some sort of production standards if people are going to use it to try to switch. Again, we want to have no sales under 18 years of age. And then we really have to have healthy warnings on it so that these adolescents know that these products are not healthy, they are not safe. The CDC, for the first time, in the FDA, they issued an e-cigarette warning, and that's simply because of the epidemic that's occurred and the risk associated with it. E-cigarette products should not be used by youth, young adults, pregnant women, as well as adults who do not currently use tobacco products. So they are really coming down in terms of offering advice. People should just not use these products. So how can you get involved? Well, honestly, it is a time commitment, definitely, but it's actually relatively, I don't want to say easy, but you can find a really good cornucopia of resources. So you can, as I alluded to before, the Julius B. Richmond Center, they actually have a they have an e-cigarette presentation kit that's available that you can download. It is non-proprietary. You don't have to pay any money for it. You can download it. I will tell you also, Stanford University in California has a wonderful, wonderful e-cigarette presentation toolkit. Again, it's non-proprietary, so anyone can use it. And what's really nice about theirs, they give you the information. So as a presenter, you don't have to look all this up. They tell you, if you're going to present about this, this is what you need to talk about. So they make it so much easier for someone to be able to speak to adolescents that maybe has limited knowledge in the utilization of e-cigarettes and these products. The American Academy of Pediatrics, of course, has a cornucopia of information. It's available on their website, and they do have a policy statement. Now, I will tell you, some of the information in it is medicinal, it's medical, but I do feel that if you are committed enough to be part of this presentation, to listen, that means that you are truly interested in helping teens. And I suspect that you'll be able to read this and understand it. So I would encourage you to look to download this and see if you can find some additional glimmer of knowledge. And then the Tobacco 21, that is the push now to raise the utilization of tobacco products, any tobacco product, to the age of 21. So we're looking at putting e-cigarettes, again, because of the 2016, deeming rule. So e-cigarettes would fall underneath these auspices. So this is a statewide push. It's coming from the federal level, and we will see if this will be able to come to fruition. The FDA has the Real Cost FDA's, it's award-winning prevention campaign, and it educates youth about the dangers of e-cigarettes. Again, this is available on the FDA website. You can actually download this information and you can utilize it. I will tell you that just recently the FDA looked at the numbers, and they feel that they've got good documentation that by showing these posters, these brochures, this information to adolescents, they've been able to make a budge and decrease the amount of adolescents that are participating in electronic nicotine delivery systems. CVS, believe it or not, our corner drugstore, has a Catch My Breath, and it has a prevention program. And as we know, they are one of the first to have stopped selling these kind of products in their drugstore. If you look at national resources, you've got the Academy of Pediatrics, as I said, the Richmond Center, also healthychildren.org. That is a byproduct of the American Academy of Pediatrics. It is an excellent resource. It has handouts that you can use to talk to adolescents. You can keep them in your offices. You can keep them in any kind of a meeting environment that you have. They have handouts for parents, and these are educational. And again, they're free for you to download and to be able to look at. If you look at Kentucky resources, and again, I recognize that this is from all over the state, all over the United States that people are participating, but the Kentucky AAP chapter has information available. And every state across the United States, including Puerto Rico and actually Canada, they have an offshoot of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So I would encourage you to look at your state's website to see if there's additional information, or to contact the president of the state's chapter to see if they have information for you. Norton Healthcare, which is a hospital here in the Louisville area, actually offers a smoking program. And then quitnowkentucky.org, that is actually a program specifically for Kentucky. And just within the last 3 to 4 months, they have taken the age down to 12 where someone can participate. Again, I would encourage you, even if you're from another state, definitely look at what resources are available. The My Life, My Quit is actually coming from a national source. So that would be available, I think, in other states, not just Kentucky. So what can a parent do? Well, definitely talk to your teen. And I recognize that sometimes that's easier said than done. Use open, non-judgmental language. And I do think that this works. You can use by asking whether they've seen e-cigarettes at school or being used by their friends. A perfect example would be if you listen to this webinar, you could go home and say, you know, I just listened to this webinar on e-cigarettes, and you know, I was just frightened by it. What, do you know anything about it? Do you know anyone that's using it? Keep it like that. If you go to your teen and say, are you smoking? Are you juuling? Are you vaping? More than likely, they're not going to answer you with the answer that you're expecting or anticipating, and they're not going to be as honest as what they would. But if you say, do you know anyone about it? Well, what do you know about it? You can at least dispel the myths that are associated with it, i.e. that it is safe. And so the first thing one must do, I think, is to speak to your teen about them. Share information, as we said. You all now have some really good resources available to you. Teenagers sometimes question our motives and question our ability to correctly say something. So I think sometimes having, you know, I saw this handout and I just thought you might want to be interested in case any of your friends are using. So again, sometimes they believe information if it's presented in a more factual pattern. I think we should definitely frame addiction as a loss of independence. Again, focus on the vaping and focus on the studies that say there's a 4 times higher risk of someone vaping going on to smoke a combustible cigarette. And definitely talk through some scripts. See if you can say, what would you do if you were offered an e-cigarette, or have you ever been offered a cigarette and what did you do? And then definitely commending them if they were able to say no to it. I would also look to see, why are they doing it? Look at your teen and see, is there something else going on? Are they feeling some anxiety? Are they feeling like they're not fitting in? See if you can look, because that has to be addressed as well as the utilization of the e-cigarettes. Be aware, know what they look like, which hopefully I've been able to share with you some of the different devices. I tell you what I have done, which has been incredibly informative. When I've given a presentation at a school, at a high school, I try to go to some of the shops around the school to see if I can see what they're selling. Again, it's a business model. So they're going to, these manufacturers, these stores are going to sell what's the most popular with the teens. And some of that sometimes can be area school dependent. So I think looking at them, finding out everything that you can about them, know the language. Again, remember, when you talk to a teenager, you really need to ask not just, are you smoking? Because again, they don't equate vaping with smoking. You want to say, are you smoking cigarettes? Are you vaping? Or are you juuling? And that's going to be the most appropriate way to ask the question. And help them make healthy choices. You know, really, really convey to them to avoid e-cigarettes. If they have not used it, commend them on their excellent decision-making skills, and still continue to give them the risk associated, because sometimes maybe they can speak to their friends if their friends are using and get them to quit. So again, give them reasons to quit, discuss the expense, the impact, and there's debate on whether these scare tactics work or not. I think we're limited in what we can offer, so I do think it's appropriate to talk to them about the yellow teeth, the wrinkling of the skin. Again, help them to quit successfully. People ask, well, what do you do if you have someone that is vaping that you know? I definitely would ask and encourage you to speak to your physician, the child's physician, about it, because again, maybe they will have some information that's available that is specific to the area that you live in. Any questions?
All right. Thank you, Dr. Purcell. Okay, we're going to open it up for questions. I'm going to go through a few more slides just in relationship to Operation Parent, and then we'll come back to questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead into the questions section and put your question in. For those of you that are new to Operation Parent, I just encourage you to stay informed about the various topics we talk about. We cover anything from the social media world, drugs, alcohol, social mental health, to dating violence, amongst the many. So you can follow us on social media, sign up for our e-newsletter. You can do that right on our website. Purchase a parent handbook, host a community presentation. I do go out to schools and businesses and do educational events, or continue to attend our webinars. Just for a reminder, the next webinar is on November 18th, Parenting for an Independent and Self-Reliant Child with Dr. Stephen Van Schoik and Karen Lawrence. We do have parent handbooks. These are our elementary. On the left here is, we have it available in English and Spanish in our Christian edition. And then our high school or middle high school, which goes into 40 topics, very much in depth, trends and misconceptions and warning signs. You can order these on our website. If you liked what you saw today, we are working all the time to continue to educate and equip parents from all over the world. Please consider giving us a donation at operationparent.org. And then I mentioned the parent events that we do. So with that, I can go back here and open it up for questions. Hold on for just a minute while I bring that open. And here we go. Okay, let me go back up here and we'll see what we've got here, Dr. Purcell. Okay, who do we talk to about co-branding some of these resources? They are great, and I would like to distribute to our parents.
I'm not for sure if I understand totally the question, but you would want to go to the specific, I understand now I get it. You would want to go to the specific sites and there is a contact person. So for Stanford, because I have used their slides when I've given presentations at high schools, if you go to Stanford, there is a contact person, and I think that you would contact them to see what you can do with the co-branding. I think if you look at some of the other facilities, it's probably going to be similar to that. Now, the Julius Richmond Center, they're pretty good about allowing you to utilize their resources too, as long as you have that on there. So I would go to who your contact person is. But I think that's a great question, because I think that's a good way to get the information out, especially if it is indicative of the facility that you're at.
Also, for those of you, we will send you tomorrow in the afternoon the audio, the recording of this whole webinar. You will have the link so that if you wish to go ahead and send that out in an e-newsletter or put it out on your websites, feel free to do that. We encourage you to go ahead and do that, but you will have the link available. And if you can't figure it out, send me an email and I can help you out with that. And that's at marybeth@operationparent.org. Let's see here. Can kids purchase jewels in stores?
Just recently, it has now been, well, let me backtrack. Theoretically, no one under 18 should be able to purchase it. Now, I'm going to use the state of Kentucky. There are 4 states now that, as you know, have banned. Massachusetts has totally banned it for a 4-month period of time. Michigan, Rhode Island, and New York have become and developed some stricter guidelines. So theoretically, let's say in Kentucky, someone under 18 should not be able to go in and purchase a Juul product. Now, Juul on its own has removed a lot of these flavored products from the market, and they're only selling them on their website. But if you get on the Juul website and look, you can see it is a matter of just checking a box, which is very easy for a teenager to be able to do. There's no ability to prove that the individual is 18 or even 21 years of age.
This is a comment from somebody saying, I was previously a user of the Juul, and I guess this person could still get a burning sensation in the back of your throat along with the vape juice leaking and coming out in your mouth when inhaling. Okay, good to know.
Well, and I appreciate that. Thank you for that. When I give the presentations across the city, I hold the Juul devices in my hand, because I show parents and anyone that I talk the whole time and I have it in my hand, and then afterwards I show them and they're amazed. And it is interesting that this participant said that, because it is all over my fingers. My fingers smell like it. There's an oil that's on my fingers that comes from just holding the device without it even being used.
Yes, and we've had the same instance when we show parents what the jewel looks like. We've had to throw away a couple pods just because they've leaked so much on our hands, and same
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
Um, Pods are for jewels, and dab pens are for marijuana.
Yeah, well, that's what they call them. The vape
Okay,
pens. Vape
okay.
pens are for the marijuana, but they call them dabbers, Dabbers, or butters, Budders. And I presume the buds are just because, marijuana is a plant and it's a bud that they actually cultivate. So the name is analogous to the product.
Somebody's asking, what about the packs that say stevia? Do you know anything about that? Any of the e-cigarettes that might have stevia in them?
No, but I wouldn't be surprised. Again,
Okay.
when we're looking at the individuals that have suffered significant lung damage, what they're finding in a great many of them, again, we're still not sure exactly what product has caused it, but what they're finding is a lot of these individuals, the adults as well as the adolescents, utilize products that were just, I'm not going to say handmade, but were not from a name brand manufacturer. So people could put almost anything in it they want, and then subsequently someone's going to purchase it because it's cheap enough, and then they're going to use it in their electronic nicotine delivery system.
Is it safe to say that jewel users are likely to be inhaling toxic metals due to the heat of the device?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, I would say that. And that's not that is just the law of heat breaking something apart and repeated use. That is just going to happen. There is nothing that, if you have a furnace, eventually your furnace goes out. The coils on your stove eventually go out. And so one can appreciate people are inhaling something that's going to be utilized multiple times, the device, and there has to be some ingestion or just an inhalation of these products.
Another comment from somebody in Ohio saying effective October 1st, Ohio has raised the tobacco purchasing age to 21.
Yay, Ohio.
Yes, exactly. Do you know if there's any enforcement or fines put in place for people who vape around children or people within public?
That's an excellent question. There are none that I know of. When I first started out, I thought, well, one of the first things I did was I thought, well, what are the laws here in Kentucky? I mean, what happens? And I try to present to the teenagers these laws in the hopes that they maybe have some fear of, wanting to do the right thing and be legal. But I've never known of anyone that has suffered any kind of consequences legally from utilizing these products.
Okay. Somebody's making a comment from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, Tobacco Cessation and Prevention Program. We have two youth cessation resources available for youth in Massachusetts specifically. This is quitting from the Truth Initiative is specific for Massachusetts. My Life, My Quit is available in Massachusetts and only in a few other states, so it may not be available for everyone on the webinar, unfortunately. What do you know about that?
That's exactly correct. That's why when I talked about it, it is, it does have some national realm to it, but it's not available. You're right, in every state. But I do think that possibly, we will first check in to see if it is available in your state, but possibly checking too to see if there's something that's analogous to it in your state. Definitely. And again, Massachusetts just came out with the ban, the 4-month ban.
Oh, that's right, they did.
Hmm.
Um, are there direct studies on e-cigarettes and the side effects such as seizures?
There are not. It's a very good point. And that's the hard part when I'm asked anything about e-cigarettes, because they've been on the market a short period of time, and I say short with italics around it. It is very difficult because, again, as I said, the FDA and the CDC, they're playing catch up. So the ability to study what happens and what's going to happen is limited just because of time constraints.
Hmm.
So the adolescents that were having some type of seizure activity, and again, associated, it's not a causal effect, it is associated with it. They've not had the opportunity to study it as robustly as what they want. And I suspect part of that is because now they have, 700 individuals that have had pulmonary damage from it.
Right. Is there a study that shows probable transition from vaping THC to experimenting with other hardcore drugs?
No, not that I know of. Now, we do know that there are studies that have looked at just smoking marijuana, that is probably accepted a little bit on a state-to-state level on the risk associated with it, simply because every state has different thoughts and different laws concerning the utilization of either a medical marijuana or non-medical use of marijuana.
Okay. And here's a question. It says, do you have a list of resources, websites that we can use and share with parents? Crystal, I'll answer that. In your handouts, we did provide you a handout with the resources that are in the presentation and a few others. Also, you got in the handouts the slides so you can actually see those same resources. So you should have two places to get them. And if you, for some reason, did not download the handouts and you did not get them in your email, check your junk email, because for a lot of people, they get to the junk email because it does not recognize my email address when I send you the handouts. If for some reason you still don't have the handouts, please send me an email at marybeth@operationparent.org and I will send them to you. How is a hookah different, if it is, than an e-cigarette or vaping?
The hookah device uses a water, and it's it probably would be, I'm not going to say a total vaporized product, but it's probably going to be a little bit closer because it's a water bath and that's how it's heated up, versus when you look at the e-cigarette juice, it actually goes over a little kind of a cottony substance and then goes and it is heated up. So probably there's going to be a little bit more, I would think, true vapor with that, although not totally.
Okay. What would you recommend for a teen cessation program?
So I guess I don't, I'm not for sure how to answer that. What would I recommend? What would I see as a nirvana, a perfect type of, is that
No,
what you
I
think,
just
Mary
think
Beth?
any ideas is what the question was, like any ideas where they could.
No, and that's where I think, well, I shouldn't say no. I do think speaking to your physician to try to get some help, number one. Number two, this is where we're facing a huge problem. So it's really a very pertinent question to ask. And the problem is that we have limited resources in terms of helping our adolescents that are addicted. Some adolescents that are significantly addicted are actually being treated in a substance abuse program, because that's the closest we can come. We've never used nicotine replacement therapy on adolescents. We've not used patches on these young children. So there is definitely some work that needs to be done in terms of treatment options available.
Okay. Is the e-cigarette aerosol just as potentially harmful as secondhand smoke? And can a bystander still breathe in the same harmful substances as the user breathes from the device?
You could breathe some of it. I don't know how much. Again, that hasn't been studied. I think probably you're looking at more so because it's an aerosol, you're looking
Mm,
at not only secondhand smoke. So secondhand smoke is you're around someone, you're right, and you breathe that in. But because it's an aerosol and it can land on things, again, I can be analogous to combustible cigarettes sitting on a couch where somebody has vaped all over it, and those particles are just going to be on the couch and are going to be actually, touched and put on your skin, whatever. So I think that it's probably going to show itself to be worse, but that's still going to be debated and needs to be further studied.
okay. Got a lot of compliments on the presentation coming through, and we're going to take about 4 more questions. Just for the sake of time, we have gone past the 3 o'clock hour. We will be shutting this down in about 5 more minutes. Any unanswered questions will be sent to Dr. Purcell, and she will answer you directly tomorrow. Okay? We are looking for an online curriculum presentation that the students can go through with up-to-date information on this topic. Any suggestions on this resource?
Yes, I would tell you to go to the Stanford University site, because they have it. It is geared for students, and as I said, it's geared for teachers. The only thing that they ask is for a small donation, and to utilize those. But you don't have to. They just suggest it, so you can download those, and they're perfectly downloadable and very, very understandable. And honestly, I think if I don't not for sure if the individual was asking, but if you had some really capable students that you felt were really comfortable as public speakers, they would be a great resource to utilize because, again, teenagers, adolescents like to talk to other adolescents. So that would be really credible. That's a really good thought.
What is the ratio of just using THC products and synthetics versus using nicotine products? And does taking THC usage into account increase the percentage of teens using vaping products?
I don't know if there's any specific breakdown that I've seen in terms of the utilization of vaping products versus e-cigarette products. So I don't think I can answer that because I've not seen anything. I think probably like everything else, though, I think it's underreported because someone is not going to readily admit to utilizing a THC product in a vape pen or any other device. I think if someone was going to admit, they would probably admit a little bit more readily to utilizing some sort of a vaping product, and that's been my experience with some of my patients that I've seen is they will admit more to the vaping than they will to the THC use.
Just to clarify, what is the likelihood of a teen progressing on to combustible cigarettes from e-cigarette use?
The study looked at it and it was exactly, well, I shouldn't say, it was somewhere around 3.6, 3.8 times greater risk. So rounding it up, I'd say 4 would be pretty appropriate. Now, with that being said, I will tell you there's some new studies that have looked at it being actually a little bit higher than that. But if you look at the seminal study that was done, there were 7 longitudinal studies combined, and it was about 3.7, 3.8, somewhere in that range.
Okay, this is going to be the last one for right now, so we can begin the shutdown here. Have you heard of the trend of vaping essential oils?
I have, and I don't know how to answer that because I find that to be utterly fascinating. Most people that I know that use essential oils tend to use it as an alternative method of health. They tend to be people that are really, I think, healthy and they're using it. And so the thought of vaping a product that, again, has not been approved for inhalation, it boggles my mind, is what I would say. So yes, I have heard about it. I think it will be on the list of things the FDA is going to have to look at.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we are going to go ahead and shut down. And I know we have a few more questions. And as I said, I will send these all to Dr. Purcell. And there are some that asking for information about the webinar and everything. So between Dr. Purcell and I, we will get back to you. The recording will come out tomorrow around 3 o'clock Eastern time. It will be automatically sent to you. So just keep that in mind. You will see it tomorrow. If you are not seeing it, check your junk email. A lot of times we get a bounce back or it'll say it went to junk. So just check that and see if it's sitting there. Anything else you would like to mention, Dr. Purcell, before we shut down?
No, but I do again want to thank you, Mary Beth, and I want to thank everyone that participated today because I think that if you took the time out of your day to participate in this, that means that you're committed to educating yourself, and that's only going to better us as we work with our adolescents.
Well, thank you. So we really appreciate Michelle, and I really appreciate you coming back on and doing this again for us.